The borderlands of Thailand and Laos are shrouded in thick jungle mist and older, deeper silences. Here, where the mountains meet the humidity, stands a remote, weathered school, its dormitory a rickety skeleton of ancient teakwood. The structure itself feels less like shelter and more like a cage, particularly after sunset. The isolation is crushing, but the students quickly learn that the true terror begins not with the darkness, but with a clock. The rule is ancient, non-negotiable, and whispered with genuine fear by the local staff. Every soul must be inside by 11, because precisely at midnight, the heavy, iron-bound doors secure themselves. This is not a matter of human security, but a dread ritual enforced by something unseen, a sentinel guarding against an entity that seeks to enter when the world goes quiet. The first sound is always the same, a deep, metallic groan that cuts through the tropical night. It starts at 11:59. The students, lying stiffly in their narrow beds, feel the floorboards hum beneath them. It is the sound of friction, of heavy iron being pulled across aged wood, accompanied by the high-pitched shriek of deteriorating hinges. At the stroke of 12, the climax, a deafening thud as the iron bolt slides home, followed by the definitive click of the padlock engaging. It is an industrial sound, far too loud for the sleepy jungle, yet the caretaker swears no one touches the lock after dusk. What forces are generating this mechanical violence? Is it a pressurized system reacting to the temperature drop? Or something far more conscious, adhering strictly to the hour, ensuring absolute containment? The history of the dormitory is stained with cautionary tales and persistent rumors. The students whisper stories of a former occupant, a young boy said to have perished near the perimeter decades ago, whose spirit never crossed the threshold of the school grounds. Legend claims the locking mechanism was installed not to keep the students safe from outside threats, but to keep him out. They say he walks the perimeter between midnight and dawn, testing the integrity of the door, seeking entry to reclaim his old bed. These whispers, shared under thin blankets, are almost worse than the noise of the lock itself, painting a terrifying picture of an entity perpetually exiled, yet constantly pressing against the boundary of their temporary sanctuary. This historical dread is the foundation of the school's deepest fear. The caretaker, an elderly woman named May, had worked at the school for 40 years, and her fear was palpable, etched into the deep lines around her eyes. She never speaks of the night, only the necessity of the rule. When pressed, she merely points to the jungle and mutters about things that do not belong indoors. Her daily routine involves checking the integrity of the iron lock in broad daylight, scrubbing the heavy metal as if purifying it, ensuring its perfect function. It is a devotion bordering on religious fervor. She understands that the lock is not just a barrier, it is a contract, a truce maintained every night with the unknown. Her vigilance confirms the horror. This is not superstition, but a vital defensive measure against a persistent, powerful malevolence seeking entry. Curiosity, that fatal flaw of youth, eventually claimed one student, a boy named Niran, who decided to document the event. Armed with a cheap digital watch and a hidden phone camera, he hid beneath the main staircase, sacrificing his sleep for evidence. He described the air pressure dropping dramatically just before the mechanism stirred, a suffocating silence preceding the mechanical groan. He focused his lens on the iron bolt. He insisted that he saw no physical person, but just before the click, the air around the lock shimmered, and the bolt moved with an unnatural, almost liquid fluidity, responding not to a lever, but to an unseen force. The raw, unfiltered terror of witnessing the supernatural automation almost made him cry out, confirming that this act of sealing was non-human. Once the lock engages, the terror shifts from anticipation to realization. The silence that follows the click is heavy, a vacuum of sound where the normal nighttime sounds of the jungle, the insects, the frogs, have ceased. It is in this void that the true sounds of the entity begin. They are subtle at first, a faint scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across the rough exterior wood, starting low near the threshold and moving slowly upward. Then comes the sound of breath, cold and ragged, seemingly pressed right against the thin planks of the door. It is the sound of deep frustration, of something vast and ancient being kept from its desires by a simple piece of metal and an unwavering schedule. Every creak in the floorboards from the inside suddenly feels deafeningly loud. The sounds don't stay confined to the door. They begin to traverse the perimeter of the structure, echoing along the wooden eaves and rattling the window shutters. The students described feeling a drop in temperature as the presence passes their specific room, a wave of profound coldness that penetrates their thin blankets. This roaming is perhaps the most unsettling aspect. It implies the entity is not randomly wandering, but deliberately searching, testing every weak point, measuring the space between the walls and the world outside. Sometimes a student reports a faint whisper, muffled by the timber, a name being called, never their own, but an old, forgotten name, perhaps the name of the spirit itself or one of its long-lost victims. One night, the entity focused its attention solely on the room at the end of the hall, room 10. The scraping became aggressive, insistent. The thudding suggested something heavy leaning against the wall, trying to push through the barrier. The students in that room later recounted the smell, a sickening odor of damp earth and stagnant river water permeating the wood, as if the jungle itself was trying to breach the walls. It lasted 40 minutes, a sustained assault that left the boys breathless and paralyzed with fear. When the sounds finally retreated just before dawn, they left behind clear indentations in the wooden sill outside, and a pervasive residue of mud that had somehow been pushed into the cracks of the wall, physical evidence of the night's ordeal. The morning after the ordeal is characterized by a deep, unnatural quiet, a hangover of dread. The early light reveals the tangible remnants of the previous night's visitor. Outside the main door, the soil is disturbed, though no clear footsteps are visible, only swirling depressions suggesting something heavy but formless moved there. The heavy padlock, so pristine the day before, is now cold to the touch and speckled with tiny, almost microscopic scratches, as if filed with immense patience. May, the caretaker, approaches the lock with palpable relief and sorrow, treating it like a wounded animal that survived the night. This daily discovery reaffirms the cycle. The students are safe, but only because the lock held, and the entity continues its patrol, waiting for the one night it might fail. The worst event occurred years ago, an incident that cemented the rule in blood. A student, restless and defiant, tired of the confinement, attempted to circumvent the lock just after midnight. He managed to slip out through a back window, believing he had outsmarted the Sentinel. His body was found before dawn, not far from the perimeter, unharmed in any conventional way, but his face was frozen in an expression of absolute, paralyzing horror. The local doctor found no wounds, only profound hypothermia and a complete mental shutdown. It was clear, the threat wasn't about entering, but about leaving. When the lock secures the dormitory, it doesn't just keep the evil out, it preserves the precious life contained within the sanctuary, protecting it from whatever patrols the empty, wet darkness of the border jungle. The true test came during the monsoon season. A violent storm erupted, causing the humidity to swell the old wood of the doorframe, jamming the ancient mechanism. At 11:59, the metal groaned, the bolt shuddered, but it failed to fully engage. The lock hung precariously, partially open. A sudden, piercing shriek rose from the darkness outside, a sound not of metal, but of pure, raw fury and anticipation. Through the gap, the students claimed they saw a flash, a momentary glimpse of movement that was too tall, too gaunt, possessing eyes that reflected the pale moonlight like polished obsidian. The caretaker, driven by blind panic, threw her body against the door, holding the failing bolt in place until the storm subsided, proving that even a small, partial failure is enough to invite catastrophic consequences. The lock was eventually repaired, The mechanism tightened, and the ritual continued. Every night, the metallic groan, the heavy thud, the final dreadful click. The children of the borderlands live permanently within this cycle of dread, trusting the iron more than they trust the dawn. They understand that their safety is conditional, maintained by a mechanical sentinel and the unseen, scheduled presence of something ancient. The midnight lock remains, a permanent feature of their isolated existence, a constant reminder that in the deep, quiet corners of the world, sometimes the greatest danger lies not in what can get in, but in what relentlessly seeks entry. The door holds for now, but the jungle always waits. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates and explorations into the world's deepest, darkest mysteries.